What is going on, guys? It's your boy Killer Cam back with what is going to be a new series, the WrestleMania review series. Now, I know there's only 35 WrestleManias, and we're about 58 days, 59 days from the making of this video until WrestleMania. So how's it going to work? Well, I'm not going to be reviewing a Mania every single day, but I will have all 35 out before WrestleMania 36. As well as the reviews that I promised you guys, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, all of the February and March pay-per-views leading up to Mania as well. But what we're going to do is when we get to about Mania 15, we're going to have a Valentine's Day Massacre 99 and Mania 15, No Way Out 2000, Mania 2000. So we're going to have two series going on at the same time. But I wanted to get into this because WrestleMania 1 is a show I have not seen in a long time. And from a historical context and a historical standpoint, it's a 10 out of 10 because of the future WrestleManias. But from an in-ring standpoint, would it be a good WrestleMania? Let's find out. This event took place on March 31st, 1985 from the Mecca, Madison Square Garden in New York City. 19,121 were on hand to witness this show. And it's interesting to kind of really take it into perspective, because it's really interesting to me to really think of what Mania used to look like now compared to what it does then, or then to now. I mean, because you have wrestlers coming out when Lord Alfred Hayes was trying to do his whole thing, you know, and they would have interviews before the matches and then a segment with Alfred Hayes after. It was really cool to see. You know, and this event was shown on closed circuit television. It wasn't shown on pay-per-view. You know, people would go to theaters and would go to everything to do it. And I think it is really, you really need to realize the historical concept that was going on, and that if this WrestleMania failed, the WWF would not have been around. It would not be around to this day. And I know you can say, well, with the product today, you know, but think about it. Without this Mania, you wouldn't have Mania 17. You wouldn't have Mania 19. You wouldn't have had Mania 30, 31. But you also wouldn't have had 9, 11, 13. Some of the best Manias, some of the worst WrestleManias. And for that, you have to kind of give this show a good show. But I'm not going to rate it based upon that. I'm going to rate it and also put my rating into consideration when I review the whole show. So the show open means, and I also have to say this show was about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I have the DVD version of the show from the WWE Tag Classics. The Mania 2 one, all it does is include the matches. It does not include the segments. But I watched it on the network because I wanted to see what the network version was like. There's that. There's that. Bada bing, bada boom. But I wanted to see what the network version was like. So let's open it up. A 2 hour, 16-minute runtime. You had Mean Gene Okerlund singing the national anthem. Not the worst national anthem I've ever heard. Far from the best. Mean Gene Okerlund did a pretty good rendition. Gene Okerlund interviewed Tito Santana and the Executioner. Executioner was Playboy Buddy Rose in a mask. And he actually had black masking tape on his boots to cover up Rose down the sideline. But it was down the side of his boots. It was pretty funny, though, to see that Tito Santana and the Executioner was the opening match in the first ever WrestleMania. These guys went out about 5 minutes. It was solid. I'll give it about a star and a half. Tito Santana actually made the Executioner tap out. So, yeah, pretty bad match to open up WrestleMania. Nothing of note there. Next match, you get King Kong Bundy defeating Special Delivery Jones in 9 seconds. It was actually 24, but the WWF made it sound like it was 9. Basically, they got in there. Bundy did his avalanche in the corner. From what I heard, Delivery Jones was supposed to go straight down, but he kind of stalled a little bit. Bundy did his splash. 1, 2, 3. Match was over. 24 seconds. But really, 9, according to the WWF, the record would stand until Kane and Chavo Guerrero at WrestleMania, when that match was actually 11 seconds. So it would not beat the 9, but even though they said it was 8, but it would beat the 24. So Kane and Chavo Guerrero at WrestleMania 24 would beat that record. Regardless, This match did what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to make Bundy a monster. And it's funny seeing how Bundy would go from this to the WrestleMania 2 main event. God, these first 2 WrestleManias, man, they were just rough. But next up, it's interesting to see this. You have Ricky the Dragon Steamboat taking on Matt Borne, and Matt Borne would later become Doink the Clown. So, and you're basically having Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Doink. And this match, for it to be under 5 minutes, was actually surprising. You know, there was a lot of good selling there by Matt Borne, and a lot of good stuff here. No, he's not the father of Evan Bourne, but it was actually cool to kind of see how this match was, you know, the selling and the technique. But it's interesting to me that you're 3 matches into the show, and you're only 30 minutes in and you've already had 3 matches. Like less than 2 matches have been 5 minutes. Then you have one that was 9 seconds. But yeah, that was blew me out of the water, actually. I'm going to give it, not the best match of the night, but I'll give it about 2 and 2.25. It was decent. I cannot lie. It was the first best match for Mania. But Ricky Steamboat, of course, are going to have better WrestleMania matches when we get to 3. You'll see. Doink is Doink. What do you expect? Next up, you'd have Brutus the Barber Beefcake versus David Sammartino. I always felt David Sammartino was, you know, he was never going to go anywhere because his dad was a living legend, Bruno. You know, and when you're in the, it's the difference between The Rock and Rocky Johnson. May Rocky Johnson rest in peace. May Bruno Sammartino rest in peace. But when you compare Rocky Johnson to a Bruno Sammartino, The Rock became better than Rocky Johnson, but David Sammartino was never going to become better than Bruno. And the whole reason why that was going to be was because of who Bruno was, selling out arenas in Madison Square Garden compared to The Rock. And Rocky Johnson. I mean, and that's kind of not just like Cowboy Bob Orton and Bob Orton. Cowboy Bob is a Hall of Famer in his own right, but his son Randy has done way more in his career than Cowboy Bob Orton would ever do. That's probably the example that is relevant to the show, but it's just interesting because you had him with his dad, and then you had Brutus Beefcake before he was the barber, and it went to a double DQ. 12.5 minutes. This match was brutal to watch. It gets a half a star. Not the worst, but definitely not a WrestleMania match you'd want to see. This to me was like a Raw. Like the lineup was like a Monday Night Raw. So the fact that this show did as good as it did, I guess it was because of the celebrities involved in the event. The reason that it did so good, I don't know. But next up, we get to the first championship match in WrestleMania history. We get the Junkyard Dog taking on Greg the Hammer Valentine for the Intercontinental title. Now, Greg the Hammer beat him in the ring, 1, 2, 3, but he had his foot on the rope, so JYD ended up winning by countout. So I'm going to give this match a star because it was kind of confusing to me. JYD wins but does not win the title. Why you didn't have Greg Valentine versus Tito Santana, I'll never know, because these two guys kind of had a feud going on into Mania. Who knows? Who knows why you did not have that the way that it was? You just didn't. And I will never understand why. Next up, you have Nikolai Volkoff and the Iron Sheik taking on the U.S. Express, so Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo for the WWF Tag Team titles. Nikolai Volkoff and Iron Sheik win, so it's the first title change in WrestleMania history. This match went almost 7 minutes. I'll give it 2 stars. It was pretty good. Pretty decent tag match for WrestleMania. Not bad. You had the first title change. You had Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff working the USSR gimmick because they were in the Cold War, I think, still at the time with the U.S. And then you had the U.S. Express, so it was actually a lot of heat having These guys win. Next up, you had the $15,000 Body Slam Challenge match. The rules here was nobody had ever been able to slam Big John Studd. So Andre the Giant challenged him. If Andre won, he'd win $15,000. If Big John Studd won, or Andre could not slam him in the time period, which I think was like a 20-minute time limit if I'm not mistaken, then Andre the Giant would have to retire. Well, Andre slammed him in about 6 minutes. It's a dud. I mean, it was basically more of an angle than a match. The most memorable moment from this Mania, though, that you'll see with Andre was him throwing the money out. That happened at this Mania when he threw the money and Bobby the Brain Heenan tried to grab the bag. God, man, rest in peace to both of those men. Big John Studd and Andre the Giant, as well as Bobby the Brain Heenan. It's sad, man. And Mean Gene. Seeing Mean Gene Okerlund, man, it's sad to see how many of these... I mean, this event was 35 years ago, so some of these guys are still with us, but it's hard to see a lot of these guys that are no longer with us. So then you get Wendi Richter versus Lelani Kai, and this was part of the WWF Rock and Wrestling Collection. Wendi Richter would defeat Lelani Kai to win the WWF Ladies title, as they called it. They didn't call it the women's title, they called it the Ladies title. But another dud. 6-minute match, another dud. I mean, these women, you know, I'm not harsh towards women's wrestling, but that match on SmackDown this past week was miles and miles better than this women's match. I mean, this match was boring. I mean, there was really nothing to really say about it. It was what it was. Main event time. Well, first of all, you had... This is why it was so big. You had Liberace, Muhammad Ali, Billy Martin, Pat Patterson, all involved in the main event. Muhammad Ali was the enforcer. Billy Martin, who used to be the manager of the Yankees, I believe, was the ring announcer. Pat Patterson was the referee, and Liberace was there as, I guess, like an enforcer. But you had the main event, Hulk Hogan and Mr.T taking on Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. Snooker was in the corner of Mr. T and Hogan. Bob Orton was in the corner of Piper and Orndorff. Why it was never a 6-man tag, I don't know, but it just wasn't. This match gets 2.5 stars, and it's interesting to me that this is the only time in WrestleMania history that a tag match main evented the show. The only time in WrestleMania history. And I'll be doing one of those WrestleMania factoids in each episode. But yes, this is the only time in WrestleMania history that a tag team match main evented. You know, you could have said maybe it could have been Hogan versus Piper for the title. I know that they did something at War to settle the score the month before this, which kind of set it up. But my overall impressions of the first WrestleMania, like I said, it's really hard to grade it. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 match quality-wise. It's not the best WrestleMania. To me, honestly, it's one of the worst. The first two are two of the worst WrestleManias ever. But you can't look at this show without looking at the historical significance of this show. If you look at the historical significance and you take that into consideration, you have to give this show at least a 7 or 8. You've got to, just because of what it led to. But I am judging it based on how good of an overall show it was, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I mean, there was just nothing there. You would not really have anything good until Mania 3. I mean, even when you look at WrestleMania 2, which we'll get to in the next episode, you had it from 3 different venues. So, I mean, there's really nothing, like I said, there's nothing to really go upon that was good on this show. Like, of course, you're going to have a bunch of Mania moments because it being the first one, and it was make or break for the company. So in that aspect, you really got to say, hey, without this one, you wouldn't have any of the other ones. But yeah, I got to give the show an overall grade of 5 out of 10. I mean, it was just it's something about the feel of the show. Like, it's the shortest WrestleMania. The runtime was only 2 hours and 16 minutes, which I was surprised about. But with just the matches on Mania 2, on the Tag Classic, Mania 2 is like 2 hours. And that's just the matches. So they must have had like an hour worth of segments or whatever. Or some of the matches are edited. It is the earliest Tag Classic release. So I don't know. I just know that we're getting to Mania 2 in the next episode, and I'm not looking forward to that one. But yeah, like I said, guys, this is gonna be my series I'm doing for WrestleMania. I might do a couple of these, and then I might do a couple with the poster and the voiceover. All depends on what I feel like. I just felt like for this episode it was appropriate if I, came up here like this. Probably going forward though, I'll do it to where I'll do like the Mania 2 poster, and then I'll just talk about the event so that you won't have to see me. I just thought that for this episode it was a historical significance that this show deserved to have me come up here. And yeah, the show will be 35 years old on March 31st. But yeah, like I said, guys, pretty average WrestleMania. 5 out of 10. Not going to waste too much more of you guys' time. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. Peace.